Good morning. My name is Ralph Arza, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Florida Charter School Alliance, working with the Executive Director, Lynn Norman Tech. This morning, we had a great opportunity to interview Richard Corcoran, Speaker of the House. Richard did an incredible job last session being an advocate for school choice. You're going to have an opportunity to hear in his words the battle that was fought, why it was fought, get to know a little bit about him personally, and also give you a glimpse into what holds this session. Last session, the Florida Charter School Alliance, on behalf of all the teachers, parents, and charter schools across the state of Florida, nonprofit board members, were able to witness the most historic legislation to be able to impact charter schools in our state. Additional funding was sent toward in the direction of teachers. Additional funding was sent in the direction of schools and facilities. Things that were seen controversial, but Speaker Richard Corcoran did a great job of bringing those ideas forward, having them pass, having the Senate accept it, having the governor of Florida in cooperation, Rick Scott, be able to sign that into law. So it was a great session. And as you hear this interview, you will see and get to know a little bit about Richard, his motivation, why he defends a parent's right to send their child to the school of their choice, and a little bit of a personal insight into Speaker Richard Corcoran. I wanted to ask, when you look back at the last legislative session, what are some of the highlights from that session that you would like to share with charter schools and the charter movement in the state of Florida?
Well, I always say, Ralph, that I think the thing we're most proud of, that we fought the hardest for, is an educational bill that I think is arguably the most pro-parent, pro-teacher, pro-student bill in the history of the state of Florida. Empowered teachers, gave parents more authority and input into their children's education, and then freed up children to learn and be great.
And Speaker, what was the motivation behind that? What was your motivation for doing that?
It's a great question, Ralph. And the motivation, it's crazy when you think about it. But we're the third largest state and the richest country in the history of the world. And when we started looking at our K-12 environment, what we found, shockingly, is that we had failure factories, schools that were failing kids year in and year out, up and down the state, affecting almost 100,000 kids at its peak. And some of those kids were in a failure factory not for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, their entire academic career. So you can imagine a parent, every single parent, you know what they all have in common? They love their children, they want the best for them. And now that parent is forced, just because of where they live, to drop a child off at a school that's going to fail them for their entire academic career. And we said, that's got to change. That can't happen. That shouldn't even be possible, given the wealth and the expertise and all the things that we have at our disposal in the state of Florida. And so we said, what does it take to change this? What do we have to do? Doesn't matter what it costs or how we do it. How do we fix this? Because it's completely and utterly unacceptable.
And Speaker, when you hear the phrase that about empowering a parent to choose the best educational environment for their child, how do you respond to that? How do you react to that?
Well, what we say is we live in a, people always say against vouchers, or vouchers is a bad word, but the fact of the matter is we live in a voucher state. In fact, the entire nation is a voucher nation. But the way the voucher system works right now is you give your money to the state, and the state takes that money and sends a portion of it down to wherever you live. And there's some bureaucrat who's sitting in an office who's never met your child, doesn't know their needs, their weaknesses, their strengths, nothing about your child. And that guy or girl chooses what school your child's going to attend and what teacher they're going to get. What we're saying is, let's flip that. It should be who's most capable of making that decision for their child. Obviously, it's the parent. And all we're saying is, let's go away from a bureaucratic voucher that hasn't been working in instance after instance, and go to one where you have a parent voucher that says that guy and that father and that mother are going to make that decision for that child. And the results will be commensurate. You'll see the results. And so that's really, people have to understand that we have vouchers. The question is, who do you want to be in charge of those vouchers? The parents or a bureaucrat?
Speaker, when you see anytime you do anything that you stand up for something that some people deem controversial, there's going to be opposition. And there are some school districts around the state, not all of them. There are a lot of school boards and superintendents who are choosing not to challenge the change in the law, but some are. What's your reaction? How do you feel about that?
I think that mindset is what gets us in this problem to begin with. How do you, as I said, the third largest state in the richest country in the world, and yet you have failure factories? And how do you get there? It's a mindset. It's in a mindset that says all of the focus is going to be on us, the status quo, the intellectual elite, holding on to that power, holding on to our clout and our status, and that's going to be our priority. When you flip that and you say that the priority is going to 100% be on making sure that child is awarded a world-class education, you don't make decisions like spending hard-earned taxpayer money on a lawsuit. They're going to end up spending tens of millions of dollars. And you know what I would say? Take that tens of millions of dollars. Don't file a lawsuit that empowers parents and empowers teachers and empowers students. Don't challenge that. Instead, take that money and give it to teachers. Reward your best and brightest teachers, because if there's one thing everyone agrees on, and it's unequivocally proven with all of the evidence that's out there, is the most important factor to the success of that child in a classroom is the person standing in front of them. And you know what they need? They need more money, and they need to be rewarded for their greatness. Not to sit and watch you piddle away tens of millions of dollars of hard-earned taxpayer money on a frivolous lawsuit.
And Speaker, as we look on to this session, you got committee meetings that are right around the corner. You've got a session that's going to take place earlier. What are some of the goals and objectives as you go into this session? What would you like to see accomplished in the areas of education?
Well, you know, the next thing that we've been talking about, and we've been talking with the governor's office, had a great conversation with him, and he's excited about it, is you try to figure out how students are failing or struggling in school. And you say, how do we fix that? How do we make it so that that child who's struggling can still work through that adversity or subside some of the adversity? Adversity is good. Adversity is great, but let's not make it overwhelming so that they can't learn. And give that child the opportunity. And one thing that we're hearing over and over, Ralph, is that bullying is a real problem in schools. And it crosses everything. It crosses racial divides. It crosses monetary divides. It crosses community. It crosses every divide out there. And so we've been having great talks with the governor's office, some of my colleagues across the hall, about saying, why don't we do this? No child. Think about it, and as a parent, I have 6 children, you know, and your child comes home and every day they're being bullied, of course they're not going to learn. And so in those instances, saying to those parents, hey, if your child's bullied and it's their education's suffering because of it, we're going to allow you to go to any school you want. Take that child and put them in an environment where they're not being bullied and picked on and where school is literally a trudgery or a fear. Just to get up and go to the school in the morning, it's torture for that child. Of course they're not going to learn. And so to take that child and put him in an environment where he can love learning and there's a community that can wrap themselves around that child and they can have a great education, I think that's one of the priorities for next session.
That's great. There are some charter schools, Speaker, that are concerned about the capital outlay money not being there to be able to pay for the facilities. And with the lawsuits that are taking place, and the legislature put $50 million there, obviously it's not enough. What would you say to those schools that are concerned when they're looking at their budgets? You've got their FTE allocation. There's very little capital outlay because some districts are refusing to want to pay that out. How do you see that playing out?
You know, I think I think what we did initially, Ralph, is we've kicked the door open. And so now the door's kicked open, and in most districts, probably in 60, 63, 64 of the districts, it's going to be more money for capital, so they don't have to take money from teachers or other pots in order to just, you know, turn the lights on. Now there's a dedicated funding source. I think the bigger picture is, now that we've pushed the door open, is to say, why is it that you have some districts who don't have money to share in the allocations of capital money? And when you look at it, it's clear. What districts have been doing, drive down the highway, go look. They've been building Taj Mahals. And these Taj Mahals are costing $40 million, $50 million, literally $100 million to build a school. And you know what? There's an old saying that a great teacher said one time, and they said, I could teach Plato under a tree. In other words, what matters is the teacher, not the venue. So why are we spending $100 million on a building, and now that's tying up all the capital money for the rest of the schools? Let's get back to reality. We don't need $100 million Taj Mahals. What we need to be building is not these fancy structures, but building beautiful minds. And let's put all the focus on building beautiful minds. And when you take and you say a $100 million building now only costs 15, you just put $85 million back into the classroom, or spread around other schools to be able to increase their awards to teachers and classroom spending. And that's a systemic change that has to happen.
Good. And let me ask you something on a lighter note. When you speak a lot about your wife and your kids. Tell us a little bit about Richard Corcoran as a person, your family, your wife, your kids.
The easiest line is I've been tremendously blessed. You know, it started, and that's the thing that you have to understand when you're looking at education. All of those blessings, for the most part, had nothing to do with me. I didn't choose to be an American. The greatest country in the history of mankind, arguably. The greatest freedoms, the greatest opportunities. I didn't choose, wake up one day and choose, okay, I want this mom and this dad. I happened to be born into two parents who lived through the Great Depression, fought in World War II, very well read and educated. Not in a formal sense, because it wasn't afforded to them. They went straight into the war, but they were just tremendously read and had a tremendous K-12 education that allowed me and my brothers and sisters. 3 of us are lawyers. One of them, 2 of them have master's degrees or graduate degrees. All of us are college educated. 5 of us with 2 parents who weren't, and that wasn't something you choose. And then I did ask my wife to marry me, so I guess I did part of the choosing. But just randomly meeting her in a law school. She was from Texas, I was from Florida. We met in law school at a small school in Virginia, random. And then we've been blessed with 6 kids. And the irony there is, I shouldn't share too much, Ralph, but the irony there is we were told that I could never have children. And then lo and behold, we have 6. So in a short, easy sentence, I'm a very blessed man.